tonight is very unique. We were going over the Pauline's privilege a little bit. Pauline's privilege is a origin for doctrines of marriage. It comes out of, in the Dissolutions, it comes out of 1 Corinthians 7, 10 through 15. To the married I give charge, not I, but the Lord's. In other words, this is a direct commandment from God, that the wife should not separate from the husband, but if she does, let her remain single, or else be reconciled only to her husband, and that the husband should not divorce to the wife. And I say the rest that not that say I say not I, but the Lord. That if any brother has a wife who is an unbeliever and she consents to live with him, he should not divorce her. If any woman has a husband who is an unbeliever and he consents to live with her, he should not divorce him, for the unbelieving husband is consecrated through the wife, and the unbelieving wife is consecrated through her husband. Otherwise your children would be unclean, but as it is, they are holy. But if the unbelieving partner desires to separate, let it be so, in such a case that the brother is not bound, for God has called us to peace. That's a very unique thing right there, called to peace. Now that is called the Pauline privilege. The Pauline privilege also goes one step further. It's called the Petrine privilege. Let me see if I can find it here. The Petrine privilege, here it is right here, provision by the church. It is known as the privilege of faith and the favor of the faith. It is recognized in the Catholic canonized, allowing for the dissolution by the Pope of a valid natural marriage between a baptized and a non-baptized person for the sake of the salvation of the soul, right there, of someone who is thus enabled to marry in the church. In essence, it is the extension to the marriages between the baptized and a non-baptized person of the logic of the Pauline privilege. Okay? This is very unique because what it basically says is, I was taught the Pauline's privilege linked with the Petrine privilege back in the 70s and 80s through Pat Robertson. It was close to the end of what was called the burning bed, if we remember that, through Farrah Fawcett. She did a movie called The Burning Bed, and that also now has the Stockholm Syndrome, where you are traumatized with the emotional, believing the person is always going to tell you the truth. It is very difficult to separate a narcissist and a wife beater, or even a spouse beater nowadays. It's almost equal across the boards on a gender level. But whenever it comes to God, if you're going to commit adultery, if you're going to fall apart in the relationship, the unbaptized, if they want to stay, can stay, and the baptized. And the reason why I'm going to hit the baptized is I was married in a baptized state. He says I was not, but frankly, I don't. Frankly, Scarlett, you don't beat the spouse God gave you. You don't abuse the spouse that God gave you, because under the Petrine law, you're beating and damaging the potential of the soul, the calling that God himself put on that soul. And that is why you can leave. If someone's beating you, if they are assaulting you, not emotionally, if they are assaulting you physically, if they are assaulting you provably, no pastor has the right to tell you what your limit is. I was in a marriage for 23 years to a man who didn't give a gosh darn about me. I didn't want to marry him. My mother made me. When I was suicidal because I couldn't take any more beatings, he had me put in a mental ward. Because I was crazy, you see. I was crazy. And then they said, oh, maybe she's bipolar. They never spoke to me. The doctors didn't speak to me, but they were giving me drugs, and they were ready to line me up for electric shock treatment, and I didn't say a word. I didn't say a word about the way he was treating me at home. I didn't want to see him. And they said, well, you still have to, because he's the one that signed you in. Okay? Well, after a year or so of therapy for abuse, and I was abusing him, you see, because I was not coming to terms with what he wanted me to do. Basically, he finally confessed to the counselor that, yes, he was a spouse beater. She, of course, left the sessions, put in someone else, and that someone else asked him point blank, what made you decide to stop hitting her so much? And God said to him, a righteous man does not beat his dog. Okay? A righteous man does not beat his dog. He did not see me as a human being. He saw me as a dog. Of course, that set up years and years of questioning. God, how come you called me a dog in front of him? He goes, it worked, didn't it? I mean, that was years of questioning God on what's my worth here. In his eyes, in my ex's eyes, I was the dog. So, I was obviously unequally yoked. Okay, that's one phrase they always use. But under the Petrine privilege, if someone is preventing you from fulfilling your calling, and the day I decided to leave was the day I told him I was going to transfer my credits from the community college up to the university level, and I was going to go for biological science. I wanted to go into microscopy and mitochondrial studies. He said he risked too much getting me educated that far. That is an abuse. That is an abuse and a narcissistic control. I was not a Potiphar's wife. I was not a witch. I was someone with a calling, and he did not recognize that. Whether he was baptized or unbaptized, he did not follow through on enhancing my future with the calling that God put on my life. So, that is the Pauline's privilege in a bit of a lump sum. It is canonized law through the Catholic Church, with several other laws, even all the way to 1982, that implement ways that the abused spouse, the neglected spouse, unable to complete your soul's calling, can still walk by faith. Okay? You can walk by faith right out the door when someone is abusing you physically, when someone is abusing you emotionally, when someone is abusing you mentally. Okay? You don't have to live with a narcissist who is controlling you. God didn't call you to be a flying monkey. God didn't call you to be a Stepford wife. Step out into God's calling on your life. It might be someone else's decision that you married. That was mine for that marriage. That was mine. So you take care of yourselves, and remember, there is Pauline's privilege, there's Petrine privilege. And if anyone is stopping you from fulfilling your personal call through any kind of manipulation or brute force or trauma, you are permitted to walk away. God bless you, and have a nice evening. Bye-bye.